Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for all of you being here. I think my talk follows nicely on Tim's talk in many ways. Let me start with a few comments on things that are flowing around. Firstly, that you may remember Ignacio Farias was talking about collaboration and collaboration. And we were talking a lot about design, STS, sociology, different disciplines. In my view, a lot of this sort of takes quite a naive view of what disciplines are and assumes that somehow people are parts of disciplines. But I think this is quite wrong. We are not. It's a matter of practice, and it's a matter of learning how to do different practices, and then we can engage with different disciplines. We don't belong. We are not owned by disciplines, and I certainly don't feel that I'm owned by disciplines. I sometimes contribute. Mostly I contribute to sociology and STS, but I contribute to other things. I also think there is an important the problems that I want to deal with are sort of opposed to, because we were handed out this catalog. On the back of this catalog, it says with regard to 3D printing, are we really going to be able to build anything our imagination throws up? And the answer kind of obviously is almost yes. But I think the problem isn't whether we are able to do it. The problem is that it's really difficult to throw things up. And there's sort of a wrong assumption that it is really, really easy to throw things up, but it's not. And the problem is how can we get at methods that allow us to throw things up that aren't naive or banal, and that aren't heroic. And here I'm very much with Nina. In many ways, this is a problem of speculation, and I have contributed a chapter specifically on thinking through speculation as method to a book that Alex Wilkie and Marcia Rosengarten and Martin Safransky are editing. So if you're interested in that, drop me an email and I'll send you a chapter. But now I want to talk about the specific project, the Cosmopolitical Problem of Provision, Cooking Emergency Scenarios. The problem really is that how do we want to live and eat together if it happens? And the it are different kinds of disasters. And how can we collectively think about this? Now, historically, the thinking about this was rather simplistic, and it continues to be simplistic. It comes in this form. It basically means that, and I'm doing ethnographic research on that, but I'm not going to talk in detail about this, but basically the answer has always been that the state, in a rather paternalistic way, is giving directives to you, to us as the population, what to do, and basically to stock stuff, water, food usually being very basic, flour, pasta, oil, sugar. And this is a historic image from the US, but 2 weeks ago, the German state has issued a new directive about what to do in emergencies, and they precisely came up again with this. And exactly the same things, sugar, flour, blah, 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 please stock it for 4 days. This is very bothering in many views because it doesn't really spell out what it assumes could happen and why we would actually need exactly these things if that happens. And it doesn't consider who we are and what we want to eat and how we want to eat. So in that project, I want to address this problem. Now, I'm running a very big project together with my colleagues Bernd Kraftner and Judith Kröll, where we try to produce emergency scenarios with a sandbox that you can see here. And I'm not going to talk about this, but this is a big project trying to find methods to come up with new emergency scenarios. Now, in what I'm going to talk for the next couple of minutes, the problem isn't so much the scenarios, but to think about the provisions and how to come up with different kinds of emergency provisions and moments in which we can consume them. So what we did is we put out a call for a dinner at the Arts Foundation in London, Delphina Foundation, which was asking people, diners, to submit their emergency scenarios, and we would turn these emergency scenarios into dishes. You can see this going on here. So I was sort of organizing this together with 5 other cooks: Catherine Kramer, Yasmina Regat, Maki Nashida, Daniel Salomon, and Zach Denfeld. And the important thing was that I basically created a very simple questionnaire that you can see here, which contains just elements that each food situation consists of. So it's a very basic sort of structuralist idea of what eating is. It's an eating situation. It requires certain tools to eat. It always comes in a sound sphere. We eat things that we eat come in textures. They have different colors. They have different tastes. They have different smells, and they have different forms. And the idea was that we would be challenged by the scenarios to use this very simple format to turn the scenarios into provisions. So each provision would answer to the scenario by working through that and turning the provision into a kind of dish that would form something that we wanted to eat collectively together in the situation of that particular disaster. Okay? So it's not an illustration of the disaster. It is rather a way and a very basic method to think through how to come from a disaster to an emergency provision, to something which we would want to do if that thing were to happen. And I'll show you here some of the dishes we produced and some of the scenarios that were submitted. So this is in French because it was submitted in French. So basically the story here is that it's almost a dreamlike scenario where someone is running on an airport runway, and the shoelaces are getting longer and longer and longer and are entangling and prevent that person from catching a plane, right? So it's a very personal scenario in this case, and it's a scenario that is kind of nightmarish. It's a problem of shoelaces. It's a very small scenario. So and again, this is not about the production of the scenario. We weren't involved in that, and I'm not saying that these scenarios are in any way particularly important or anything. So what we did here was basically a recreation of this runway situation that you can see here on the floor. So producing a food situation which was a collective gathering at this runway. And on this runway, you can see 4 different kinds of stripes, which are both obviously traces of the plane and the shoelaces. One is an aubergine, a smoky sort of aubergine puree, having this kind of burnt color and taste. The other one is a chicken liver foam, again having kind of a very anthracite color, very metallic livery taste, a lime gel, and lime gel here, and goat cheese mousse. And obviously the problem being the entanglement of the laces. What is happening here is that the laces are soft and edible, and the entanglement dissolves while you eat collectively on this runway. The second scenario, again, very personal. This is how it was submitted. Basically, someone encountering a morning of a collapsed wardrobe. And the dish that answers the collapsed wardrobe is basically a tower, as stable as possible, very classical brickwork composition, as you can see. The bricks are produced from sous vide cooked vegetables, different kinds of vegetables, meaning that they are equally dense throughout. So this is really sort of as stable as you can produce a tower with cooked food, and each one obviously answering to different colors and tastes of what is in her wardrobe. This one is too complex to explain, but you can see here because the disaster scenario is very, very long and goes on many, many levels, but this is basically a deconstructed fondue that is later reassembled. So these are the different parts of a fondue: cheese, alcohol, wine, and corn flour. And here you can see a scenario which is far more, this is far more sort of societal and global, in the sense that you are encountering a group of people with all different kinds of food habits, and the problem is that you don't know who is who and what kinds of food habits and problems they have. While at the same time the people lose all kinds of smell and taste. So the problem is you have to cook for people who you don't know what they want to eat and what they can smell and taste. And here the dish is so it's all white. It's most of it is rice. It's just rice in different textures. So it's just normal kind of basmati rice with some rice crackers and some Rice Krispies and some rice jelly and some kind of milk rice. And then this goes along with highly allergenic foodstuffs, being chicken, peanut, and shellfish. Shellfish also obviously answering the religious problems of some of the population, being Jewish, not eating shellfish. And so then this was served with sort of answering each person about all these incompatibilities. And finally, do I have half a minute? Okay, perfect. The last scenario is again a problem of how to perceive the world. So the human population cannot see color anymore, and only a very small percentage of the population can. And we answered this affliction by producing, this was sort of the dessert course. It's a super colorful dessert, which is basically a rainbow on the plate. But people cannot see what is happening because they have to eat it with a shade. Thank you.